on with our 10 minutes of morning calm. And today we're looking at is the basic question, who do you answer to? And it's a really important question because I think it's one of those questions, like there's a lot of spiritual stuff, right? As Richard Rohr said, where we have to be able to hold paradoxes. And in a fascinating point that he made, he said, yeah, maybe paradoxes are the closest to the truth that we get, because there's always these little subtle gradations, these subtle ways of holding it. And no question I can think of that does that. And well, I'm sure there's some other ones actually, but it's a really good question to think, who do you answer to? Just knowing that there's a lot of different answers there that are right in different circumstances. And maybe the question's what's important, and to know at certain times we will answer that differently. And that's really the spiritual path. So what I want to read for you today is, this was a passage where Emanuel Swedenborg talks about like some of the challenges that are part of this, and the challenges that can become if we become too self-centered, and how language gets muddled and understanding gets muddled and connection gets muddled. And it's a real short statement here. It's defining self-love. And think of narcissism here. Think of like self-love gone completely to an ugly extreme. Self-love is nothing but the conviction that we answer to ourselves alone. Self-love is nothing but the conviction that we answer to ourselves alone. Now, that's a really interesting point, because a lot of people will talk about, like, unto thine own self be true. That's the most significant thing, is to be true to yourself, et cetera, et cetera. In many, many circumstances, that's actually true. That, yeah, we really do want to be true to ourselves, especially if we're coming from the higher angels of our nature and we find ourselves within an arena where things are happening that are not okay, and we may need to make a stand and become, as Henry David Thoreau said, a majority of one, which I always like that phrase. And we just want to be careful, though, that if it's always about, again, like, just to go back to the line again, self-love is nothing but the conviction that we answer to ourselves alone. If really all we believe is the only person we're answering to, the only thing we're answering to is ourselves, that's going to be problematic. And I think you can see that. Like, again, goes back to who do you want to hang out on an airplane with? Somebody who's all about themselves, or somebody who's actually all about connection? And if it's all about yourself, you're going to find it pretty lonely going. So looking at it, folks, like what does it mean to really be answerable to yourself? What's the good kind of like, yep, I'm answerable to myself? And that's, again, comes back to the better angels of our nature, comes back to the inmost, comes back to that part of us, to our conscience, which is part of the new will, part of that heart of stone becoming a heart of flesh. And that's going as deep as we can go, because that's actually connected to God. That part of self, that best self, better angels of our nature, best intentions, the new will, the conscience, that part is answering to God all the time. And it's answering to God all the time in such a way that we will feel distress when it's just like, man, this just doesn't feel right. And, I love the phrase, the smell test. It's where we hit those things just like, oh, this just doesn't pass the smell test. It just feels wrong to me in some way. It just feels off to me in some way. And that's because there's part of us connected with God that's just not feeling it, that's somehow feeling this is askew. So folks, like think about that, and think about as well, like with who are you answerable to, or who do you answer to? There's just got to be a pretty rounded perspective on that. Of course, we've got to answer to ourselves, and we also have to have God in that equation. And oftentimes that's an internal thing. Some of the time that's an external thing, where we can look at like things from the Word and be like, oh yeah, it's pretty clear. God says, "Thou shalt not steal." Probably not a good idea to steal. We look at that externally. And also notice that you're answerable, I think, to your family, to your loved ones, and to your community. I think those as well are places where we're answerable. And it's not that we want to get consumed about that and to like, get into the do you like me now? Do you like me now? Where it's sort of a codependency. That's not it at all. But we have to be consistently answerable to things that include us, but that are also outside of us. And we have to be answerable to things that are true to us, but that are also inside of us. So if you kind of think of this answerable question, it both goes in and it goes out. And how do we find that in part? How do we find that out part? That's a big question. So friends, like today the takeaway is just real simple. Like, who are you answerable to? And don't leave it up here kind of esoteric, like who are you answerable to? Let's have a big debate about that. But think about it, like, who am I answerable to today? And you'll probably meet them within the next hour, and you'll probably be pretty clear that, oh yeah, this is the person I'm answerable to today, maybe if even for just 2 minutes. And what does that answerability look like to them? What does that look like when you're answerable to them? And it could look any number of ways. I mean, hopefully it feels a little inspiring, in terms of, oh yeah, there's something I'm being called to hear, some connection, some question I might ask, some way to support them, some way to serve them. That answerability, I'm hoping you find that a bit today. So, who are you answerable to? There's your question for today. And again, I think it's one we pull with us, and that we bust out in all kinds of different circumstances of life, and and just find a lot of joy as we do that. So that's the thought for today, friends. And what we're going to do now we're going to shift gears into a meditation, into a prayer, into a blessing. And with looking at the meditation, we're just going to breathe a little bit, go into it, and then we'll close. So with that, friends, let's get a little breath. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I. Be still and know that. Be still and know. Be still and be still. Be. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. All right, dear friends. Well, I'm just going to wish you all the very best this week.